Right, I think we're at 1 minute past, so I suggest we kick off. Very good afternoon to all of those who have joined us today, and welcome to this webinar, which is titled Putting AI into Action, an in-conversation webinar on how AI adoption can support UK businesses to become AI ready. I'm Usman, techUK's Program Manager for Artificial Intelligence, and I'll be chairing today's session. I should say that this webinar comes at a very exciting time, given the AI ecosystem. And on our side at techUK, we are revamping our Putting AI into Action webinar series, and this will very much be the first of many where we look at the challenges to adoption, solutions, but also exploring opportunities for the benefits of our members. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by a fantastic panel of Iain, Varun, and Richard, and I might just pause to let them introduce themselves. Iain, shall we kick off with you?
Sure, yeah. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Iain Mackay, and I'm the Director of AI Safety and Government at 𝗂𝘂𝘁𝗶, which is an applied artificial intelligence company based in London. About 400 people, been going 10 years and specialist in AI. Thanks.
Thanks, Iain. And we'll go to Varun.
Afternoon, everyone. Varun Sarin. I'm a managing consultant here at Credera. We look after a wide variety of clients in the AI space, particularly in regulated industries. I have about 15 years of work experience in technology and AI since 2017.
Thanks, Varun. Richard.
Thanks, Usman. Hello, everybody. I'm Richard Ward. I work in government affairs for IBM in the UK. I've been working on questions of productivity, economic growth, and technology for quite a long time. Particularly in the adoption of AI, I did work on a government review of AI in the manufacturing sector, which those of you in that sector will know now as the You Made Smarter review. So I led the AI work for that particular review.
Thanks very much, Richard. And before we sort of kick off, just a few house rules. So the session, as you may have noticed, will be recorded. I know that attendees have turned their cameras and microphone off. Thank you for that. And in terms of questions, do pop them into the chat. We're very keen to field questions at the end of the session. I know that Iain, Richard, and Varun are happy to answer any questions on that. So I suggest we kick off. If we start with the opportunities, challenges, and solutions in relation to AI adoption, I might ask the panel to explain why they think AI should matter to businesses. And should we start with Richard?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Usman. So I think trying to think about the problem, the question of why AI should matter to businesses. I mean, if we look overall at the AI landscape, we can see businesses, some businesses forging ahead with their adoption of AI. Probably they're typically, more often than not, those organizations that are already quite advanced in their use of technology. But I think on the opposite side, we can see companies who are lagging in their adoption of the technology. And I think this probably isn't unique to AI for us as a country, but is true of technology adoption across the board, in that we tend to have, leaders and laggards, and they do tend to be quite separated. I think that, though, now it's fair to say there are plenty of examples of some successful uses of AI, and particularly uses of AI that actually are not all that complicated. And so you can take a relatively simple use of it and make a dramatic difference to either productivity or the in the delivery, say, of public services, but also productivity in the private sector. So I thought just to look at one public sector example for a moment. One NHS hospital trust looked at the issue of no-shows for appointments. And you won't read a great deal about the NHS without coming across the vexed issue of what the NHS can do about no-shows. So this particular hospital looked at this question with IBM and also with another process intelligence company called Celonis, and they looked at the patterns of no-shows for appointments, and they found by analysing those using, in this case it was IBM's Watson products. they could reduce the number of people who didn't turn up for appointments, and where people were prone not to turning up, they also had a way of filling the missing appointment slots more quickly. So in the end, they concluded they have ended up treating an extra 700 patients a week as a result of what isn't really very complicated use of the technology. So, I mean, that's just one example. I think there are an enormous number of examples in using AI for customer support. I didn't want to use this as my only example, but because I know we can easily go down the kind of chatbot line. But so my own company's worked with lots of particularly large organizations looking at how they can improve their customer interactions, and particularly how they can use how they can train AI models using their own internal data in order to deliver more value to somebody who's contacting their call center. I think thinking back to the question of AI in manufacturing, which I already mentioned, businesses with large numbers of assets to manage, there's a clear case for using AI to help increase the availability of those assets. So whether you do that by predictive maintenance or other ways, you can reduce the amount of time that, say, you have to take down a production line to maintain it, which has an obvious knock-on effect on productivity and cost. Or you can, by doing that, you also reduce the unexpected downtimes as well, which themselves are probably even more damaging than the planned downtime. So I think, in summary, you can use AI to help drive productivity and quality across quite a range of business activities, and it helps to make your use both of staff and resources more effective. So, Usman, I think I've finished at that point, but I hope I've kind of tried to address the question of why businesses should be interested in AI.
Brilliant, thanks, Richard. And I think some interesting use cases that you've showcased there. I think in relation to health and social care, especially given the sort of post-COVID backlog, I think AI can be deployed and leveraged to really sort of have an impact in that space, also with manufacturing as well. So thank you for those insights. I'll pose the same question to you, Varun. Why should it matter to businesses?
Thanks, Usman. So I think what makes this really interesting, AI and Gen AI in particular, is that it's not only a new technology, but it also changes our interaction with technology. And I'm sure everyone on this call has experienced AI in some way recently and seen what a difference it makes in terms of how we create websites and how we search for information, how we design customer experiences. So there's a lot of excitement around the technology. And there is, for businesses, I think, a massive fear of missing out factor that goes along with it, that says, I need to be keeping up with what's happening in the market. But the challenge is that, and you can, depending on the study you look at, anywhere from 80 to 92% of AI projects do not fulfill the potential that they were started out with. And in many cases, businesses don't know exactly how they will measure success with a technology that's evolving so rapidly. So I think the real question is, and I think in today's discussion, I hope we start touching on these topics, is where do you invest? And how do you separate the hype from the reality or the potential that's there? And how do you make sure you don't get left behind when it comes to your competitors, or whether it comes to the value that you're offering customers for your business?
Thanks, Varun. Yeah, some interesting points as well. And I think it's certainly a case that there are different opportunities for different organizations, depending on sector, size, and so on. So some useful food for thought. Iain.
Thanks, Usman. So I think the first point I would make is that it's important that we don't fall victim to the common issue of sort of shifting baseline when we're discussing AI. AI is here now, has been here for several years. And when we talk about AI, it doesn't just mean the future technology developments that are coming down the track. Businesses are already using AI every day to great effect. And I think Varun's point about the sort of the iteration and the next step that Gen AI offers is entirely valid. But yes, it is already here. I think the pressures that Varun and Richard have talked about, both in terms of the external sort of fear of missing out factor and the internal opportunities that this presents for productivity, business performance, job satisfaction for job holders as well, to automate some of the drudgery or the less satisfying tasks, and to allow people to operate at the correct level that's commensurate with their skill sets. I think those are also all really important. So Richard talked about some of the evidence of the impact that we've seen in things like healthcare and life sciences. In retail and consumer, there's work that we've done within faculty within the telecom space, not using chatbots to handle customer service, but to help to use AI to assign the task to the right person within your human workforce. And that's resulted in a £9 increase per customer service call. So when you multiply that across this major telecoms provider handling hundreds of thousands, if not millions of calls per year, that's a significant increase in revenue. Similarly, personalized marketing, we've seen a 4 to 5% increase in sales uplift through personalized marketing in the retail space in one project that we've delivered. But as Varun says, it's difficult to get things through from proof of concept to production. And so when AI matters to business, it needs not to just be about testing out what works. It needs to be about seeing things end to end and trying to sustain through to achieve those impacts.
Really good insights. And I think I like what you said at the end in terms of making sure that it's sort of seen end to end. I think it's often the case that some organizations may be stuck in what's known as sort of pilot purgatory, whereas whereby AI is adopted but not implemented across business functions. So therefore the maximum utility is not really seen. So yeah, thank you for that. Just moving on to the challenges. Again, sort of varies based on sector, organization, and so on, but we'd be sort of keen to learn and hear from all three of you in relation to what are the most pressing challenges in relation to AI adoption. Richard, sort of keen to get your views in relation to the sort of data quality and governance side of things, and possibly touching on the sort of technological and regulatory uncertainty. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Usman. I think I'd probably start off with a general comment, which I hope is consistent with what I said by way of introduction, and that is, I think we have a significant number of organizations who don't really know where to start. So that I think that's a problem that we have to overcome, and I think we'll return to this later on in the discussion in looking at ways that that we can help overcome some of these problems. But I think let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that we've got an organization that has identified a set of problems, and they think that AI would be able to help them in dealing with those problems. So then I think that we come up against the first issue we come up against probably is one of data. So you need to be collecting and retaining the data that is going to go into your AI systems, and you need to be able to use it with confidence that it's actually relevant and accurate. So thinking about, for it as an example of that, I mean, one that I've heard talked about before is and this you can imagine in the context of a lot of applications, but if you think about a manufacturing company who want to use AI to manage and predict and monitor the behavior of, say, an automated production line. So they've instrumented it, it's producing vast amounts of data from the instrumentation on the line and through different machines. And actually, in order to make that manageable, you decide that you're only going to retain data for exception conditions. So where the line itself isn't behaving properly, or there's an issue in one part or other of it, then you keep that data because it helps you understand that anomaly. Now, that's okay until you want to train an AI system to do that monitoring and optimization for you. And one of the things you want to do is train it to understand what normal looks like. And you don't have any data on that because you haven't been keeping it. So, you know, there's often things like that you set out on the journey thinking that there's a clear path to getting there, and actually you find that you need to do some other things in the meantime. And the other thing you would need to do in that situation is to look to the data. Do you have the data that you actually need, and what you need to do in order to be able to take advantage of that. Now, thinking about the once you've got through that situation, then you've, I think, faced the question of what data do I have? Can I use it in training AI systems, or are there some implications that either technically related ones, but more likely kind of regulatory related issues around, for example, if the data contains personally identifiable information, then what are the privacy issues that I face in using that kind of using it in that kind of context? Those of us who have spent years in this area and for whom it is our job, still struggle to deal with some of those kinds of issues. And so an organization who doesn't have access to a high level of expertise in that could reasonably be expected to have a level of uncertainty and concern about what they need to do in order to deal with privacy. And there are other issues too, I guess, around intellectual property, and maybe not so much from the issue of how we've trained large language models and in the intellectual property questions around those, but even looking at it from the point of view of a company wanting to use a large language model, if they put their own IP into customizing that model for their use, then what happens to that IP? And do they retain the rights to it, or have they found that they've just given it away? So I think large numbers of questions around that area that it isn't surprising that people struggle with.
Thanks, Richard. Definitely sort of significant barrier, and I suppose the sort of data quality and governance side of things does feed into the sort of technological and regulatory uncertainty faced by organisations. In particular, SMEs are often resource constrained and have the compliance teams, and so really having to sort of start from scratch, but also being exposed to different types of regulation. If you sort of look at the EU's approach versus the sort of approach in the UK as it was, so yeah, a lot of uncertainty and a lot to navigate. Thank you, Richard. Varun, I might sort of move to you. I know that Credera are obviously keen to hear your views in relation to the barriers, but I also know that Credera is sort of plugged into the skills debate as well. There's a lot of thought leadership around there, so very much sort of keen to hear your views on that, and along with anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me set out what the challenge is on skills gap, because it's an area I feel quite strongly about. The National Audit Office did a survey earlier this year where 7 out of 10 government bodies believe they do not have the right skill sets to leverage AI solutions, and they struggle to retain and hire talent in that space. And I don't think that's a surprise, given the fact that you see things like, Netflix advertising for a data scientist role that starts at $900,000 a year. Those kind of salaries, the talent pool is very small of highly qualified people. But I think what's being missed is this almost dichotomy of AI training required. Yes, there is highly technical and advanced solutions that need to be built out, and there's a small group of people who can do that. At the same time, the types of solutions that AI is providing us have lowered the barrier of entry into technology. You no longer need a sophisticated, degree or a certificate to start building applications or starting to prove concepts in AI. And if you look at specifically in marketing for what copywriters and designers do, there are a lot of tools out there now that allow people to get started quickly. So you've got this almost two ends of the spectrum. And the important bit is, how do you bring everyone on that journey with you, right? So how do you make sure that no one gets left behind? And in particular, and this is something that I'll come back to later, focus on younger people, ones who are just starting out their careers, because they have the most to lose. Because a lot of the jobs that you would probably do as an intern or a graduate are likely to be the jobs that will get replaced by AI. So how do you provide those entry-level roles with the right amount of skill sets so they can make use of AI, advance their careers, and at the same time, bring value to the organization? So I've kind of set out the stall for this. From a solutions point of view, I do want to talk about something that we've done within Credera, which is we created the AI Academy. And the AI Academy focused on developing training for technical and non-technical staff. And we very quickly set ourselves a target of 95%. So 95% of the organization will have some sort of qualification in AI that they can then leverage in their day-to-day role. It doesn't have to be for a client-facing project. And I think there are a few results from that I can share when we start talking a little bit about solutions later in the talk.
Brilliant. Thank you, Varun. Absolutely, I think there's definitely a sort of skills gap, and it's about making sure, as you said, that individuals aren't left behind. And I think we are seeing progress in terms of how AI can be democratized, can benefit all, but I think there's a long way to go, I think, in relation to that. So yeah, thank you for sharing your views on that. Iain, I'll go to you. I know that the sort of trust and safety debate is one which is quite prevalent. I'm not saying we'll solve it in this meeting, in this session, but very much sort of keen to hear your views in terms of the barriers and particularly on trust.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, I head up our AI safety work, and that includes sort of the frontier AI safety research that we conduct with government and some of the labs. But I think thinking about in a practical way about the safety and trust issues here, Gen AI in particular does introduce a large range of novel risks that do exacerbate that trust issue that I think we're facing. And there is also sort of combined with that a sense of the fear and uncertainty and doubt that you see with the novel technology that's still working its way out, a range of issues, legal risks, such as things like copyright material that are still waiting to work their way through. I think in terms of privacy and security, the core issue that we saw after the rollout of ChatGPT at the end of 2022 and sort of the initiation of this Gen AI hype cycle was the sense of can I trust it with my data? Can I put my data into the prompt and have confidence that it won't be used to train future iterations of the model? And I think that issue has largely been solved for the vast majority of users, particularly corporate users, with the advent of Azure OpenAI services and Amazon Bedrock and some of the open source models that if you really need a private instance of a model to be deployed on your own infrastructure, you can do it that way. But other issues persist around things like the risk of hallucination, issues of explainability, understanding what the model's doing and how it's doing it, the reproducibility of outputs. Are you confident that if you do something once, the same thing will happen again? The potential for bias to be introduced into the model, and you potentially not to see it because you don't have control over how that model was trained, and then issues such as the currency and the recency of information, perceptions amongst your workforce of their job security, and some of the environmental impacts as well, which do at times, I think they need to be seen in the round as a net effect, because obviously AI has a significant potential for environmental improvements as well. But it is true that it is in tension at times with some of the companies' ESG goals, things like that. So I think there are ways to approach all of those issues, but I'm sure we'll get onto those just shortly. But that's sort of an overview of some of the trust issues that I think companies face.
Great, thanks, Iain. And I think for my own sort of research and exposure to the sort of AI trust debate, I think we are sort of seeing the sort of public discourse, the public debate actually feeding into how businesses take decisions in terms of how best to incorporate AI, what are the safeguards in place, as you sort of mentioned, the concerns regarding hallucinations and whether or not the sort of what feeds into the data debate as well, I would say. So yeah, thank you for that. So we've touched on the opportunities, the challenges. The sort of tricky part of the segment is, the sort of solutions. What can be practically done? Again, we might not sort of solve them in this session, but sort of keen to hear your views on that. Richard, I might start with you in relation to you sort of touched on data, but in terms of any sort of observations, insights, views in relation to how we can sort of really sort of spearhead this movement and really get the ball rolling.
Yeah, thanks, Usman. I think a large part of this comes down to governance, whether that's governance at a technical level or governance at an organizational level. And I think if we start just with the data that's being used in AI model training, we could probably spend a whole day just talking about this, but I think there's things that organizations need to think about, and they need a structure in place then that makes this become part of the business process of the organization. So companies need to understand what data they have, which might seem like an obvious statement, but is actually quite difficult, I think. So what data do you have? How confident can you be that it's actually accurate? Do you have rules in place that comply, for example, with privacy regimes? There's a whole range of issues that come to the fore then. And then, of course, I think we're seeing probably even increasing more now than has been the case before, is your data secure against either misuse or theft or corruption in the case of some types. I mean corruption of the data, not corruption of the of individuals. So a whole range of security issues as well that come into play in dealing with the data that you have. Then I think we move into the area of AI governance, and I expect my fellow panelists will have a bit more to say about this, but I'll just touch on it very briefly. How can you be sure that the data that you've used to train your model then results in something that isn't biased? Because there's sort of generally a straight line between if the data itself is biased, then you can't expect the model not to be. So we need to have a kind of governance method to make sure that the model itself is fair. People need to understand the data that they've used to train the model, which sounds obvious, but isn't always the case. And then once you're comfortable that you've put a model or you've deployed a model into your business that is fair and isn't unbiased and so on, how do you monitor it to make sure that it remains that way, so that it doesn't drift, I suppose, in terms of the conclusions that it's coming to. Now, many organizations have come up with tools to help companies do this. From my own, it is snappily titled 𝗤𝘂𝘁𝗁_Governance, which is sort of one of those, it does what it says on the tin descriptions, but it's not. But companies can have their own choice of where do they go to help them plan their governance journey. And I think the only point I would make really is that it's important to do it. Probably how you choose to do it is a different issue, but just getting down and actually doing it is important. Anyway, I'll finish there. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. I completely agree. I think it's often the case that organizations do need to invest in data governance structures, and I suppose there's scope for organizations that have done it to then sort of share ideas in terms of best practice and so on. So yeah, thank you for flagging that. Varun, I'll hand over to you. You might want to touch on a few things, but I know that you also want to build on what you said in relation to sort of AI literacy, upskilling the workforce, reskilling and so on. So we're keen to learn from you in relation to what the solutions are, but also what particular skills will the future workforce need right now, but also to really ensure that AI is used and deployed in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Iain outlined some of those parameters quite well. And I think I find governance as a really interesting topic as well, because when you look at are you bringing everyone on that journey, that includes people who work in risk management, data protection. And if they don't understand what these solutions look like, then they're not going to get them to a stage where they can be deployed into production. So I think very much, looking at AI literacy, it's not just about having a nice to have. It is actually fundamental to business success, because all those people will need to understand exactly what it is that they're approving. And I think it falls into three buckets for me, because it's very easy to look at literacy as a technological capability. It's not, although that is a part of it. And therefore, how do you get your engineers who are, data engineers, cloud specialists, how do you get them trained up in the relevant tools and technologies that will help them pivot towards adopting AI and Gen AI solutions in particular? So that's a very specific niche set of training. But for everyone else, I think this is about being able to understand the jargon easily. What's the difference between even what we're saying on this call, Gen AI, what's the difference between that and deep learning? There are a lot of these terms out there, and it all gets badged under this AI label, but that's not necessarily correct. So you want everyone in your organization to be able to understand the differences between the types of solutions that are offered here. The second bit for me is then transferable skills like prompt engineering, because most organizations won't be building their own AI solutions from the ground up. They will actually be experiencing it through third-party products they already have, Microsoft and Google and your Adobe and Salesforce platforms. They're all embedding AI within them. So you're going to get hit with a lot of these AI solutions, whether you are ready for it or not. And the important bit is your team has to be trained up to be able to get the most out of those solutions, which means, do you know how to ask the right question? And do you know how to identify and interrogate a response that's provided to you so that you know what's accurate and what's not? So creating those sort of guardrails, I think, really helps, because it helps move forward on this adoption journey. And I think the bit for me is, there's a technical bit, there's the non-technical bit, and I'll come back to what I was talking about for young people. For graduates, I think it's a slightly separate ask. And the way that we've set it up in Credera is that we've put our graduates within certain sectors, because that's how we sort of deliver projects for clients. So we've asked our graduates to do a rotation and become experts within a sector or a set of sectors. Go understand what the use cases are, see what people are deploying today in AI and how that works. And can you identify new use cases for it? Because again, given the amount of technology comfort level that's there in the younger generation, they'll be able to see the potential far sooner. So again, you put them in the forefront of identifying what a good use case looks like, and then you train your technical and non-technical staff to be able to use the technology correctly. And it's that combination, I think, that also then probably builds on some of the things that Iain and Richard were talking about.
Thanks, Varun. I think it's, I completely agree. I think it's often the case that in terms of the future workforce, we really need to sort of plant the seed quite early on. And if we sort of think about, graduates, they've got a student mentality in the good way, in the sense that they're able to soak up large volumes of information. And so it's really about, how can we best train them? How can we equip them with the right skills? But also, as you sort of said, what skills would an individual need to communicate what AI does to non-technical stakeholders, which is another sort of debate and conversation. But I think you're absolutely right to touch on that. Iain, I'll sort of go to you to sort of discuss. We can sort of touch on governance as well, but to sort of get your views in relation to responsible AI policies, possibly AI assurance. What should that look like? What should that entail?
Yeah, thank you. So I think the first thing I'd say is that sometimes we find in faculty, when we talk to businesses that want to adopt AI, you can have a sense that the tail is wagging the dog here a little bit. We should start from your business, your requirements, your processes, the decisions that you take, and then you build a system that incorporates the technology to address those issues. You don't start from the technology and then go looking for a business requirement. And that means that you can ensure that the use case and the system that you build around it is framed to be safe in that context. There is no individual single transferable definition of safe AI or responsible AI. That has to be considered in each individual context and in each individual use case. And a company looking to incorporate AI needs to think about what responsible AI means for them, what safe means for them, because it will not mean the same for all companies. So we can't look to implement a decision tree type model where someone will be able to say, if this, and this, then it's safe, let's go. We have to work with companies to look at a series of principles or sort of foundational commitments that they seek to make that will hold across their deployments of AI. And then we look to ensure that any individual deployment is consistent with that. Now, when I say system that incorporates your that incorporates the AI that's to address your use case, that doesn't necessarily mean sort of building a major undertaking from scratch. That could just be an out-of-the-box commercial model that you're using, via web API or whatever it might be. But it's thinking about the overall system. Where's the human within that system? And ensuring that you are addressing the various different risks through framing the use case effectively. If you're concerned about hallucination, for instance, don't choose a use case where you're going to be passing the AI model's output directly back to your customers. Ensure that you're framing things around that effectively. So I think that's the core thing that I would want to prioritize in terms of offering a solution here.
That's it. Thanks, Iain. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think what I've sort of seen is the sort of emergence, and I think definitely a trend whereby organisations are recognising that AI is being deployed within the workforce, within the workplace, and so they're sort of putting together guidelines in terms of what ethical AI use looks like. And I think sort of just feed into, well, if you do sort of input content into systems, just make sure that it's safe, secure, there isn't sort of confidential information being inputted, just in terms of addressing sort of privacy concerns and so on. So thank you for that. So I think that sort of moves us on to the second part of the webinar, which deals with how can organizations and the next government work together to support businesses in their AI adoption journey. So it wasn't intentional, but obviously there was an election underway in the UK. So we're very much sort of thinking about what are the recommendations for the next government? What can industry do to work together with government in terms of practical recommendations and so on? So I know we've sort of touched on a few of these concepts in the last segment, but we'd be sort of keen to hear from the panelists about, I suppose, how businesses can be supported to tackle the uncertainty they face, but also recommendations as well. So, Rich, I know you sort of touched on the sort of business leadership side of things, but sort of keen to hear possibly a bit more about that, along with the sort of broader question about what can organisations and businesses do together.
Yeah, great, thanks. So I think just as a starting comment, whatever the outcome of the general election is, we know that the next government will face the need to drive economic growth. So that will be a vital part of the agenda of whoever forms the government. And as part of that, they will need to drive productivity. And, in reality, the only way to sustainably deliver improved living standards is by increasing productivity. So until you do that, then there are all sorts of ways you can make yourself feel richer, but actually, unless you're producing more, you're not really improving your living standard. So it will be a big priority for whoever forms the next government. I think if we look at the businesses that are involved, then I think there are two things that we need to understand, but we're not brilliant, I don't think, at either of them. So first of all, I think we need to understand, where do businesses go for help or advice and for leadership? And I'm thinking particularly of the businesses that aren't at the leading edge of deploying AI technology. I think it's likely to be different by the type of company, and it's likely to be different at least by sector. The question of kind of large versus small might come into it, but I think that's generally quite a lazy way of saying smaller companies deploy less technology and are less productive, because I don't think that's true. I think large companies can be part of the laggard group, just as small companies can be at the leading edge of technology development and deployment. So I think size isn't really the way to look at it. So, but for the companies who aren't at the leading edge, where do they go to get advice and leadership? And I think in part they listen to people like themselves. And so, there's some sort of lesson there for how do we increase, raise the tide for everyone so they can catch up with the people who are leading. And so it's kind of who are the innovators in a sector or a particular area, and to what extent are other businesses looking to those innovators for a lead, and how can we encourage that? So I think there's where do they go? I think the second question that we sometimes underestimate is what are the motivations of businesses and individuals? And we tend to start off assuming that it's true that everyone wants to become more efficient, more productive, and to grow their business. And I don't think that's true. Of course, a lot of people want to do that, but there are a significant number of businesses in the UK who just want to carry on as they are. I mean, sometimes some of them are referred to as lifestyle businesses, which I think is unfair. But it's people who have a business, they're running it in a way that they want, and they don't want to start employing more people because that's a problem that they prefer not to take on. Now, so I think we have to understand what's motivating different types of people in different types of organizations. But I think the reality of it is, even if you don't want to grow, what would appeal to you is freeing up some of your time. And so it probably is just another way of looking at the same question. So I'm sorry I've gone on about this a lot, but I think if you look at people who are having to work every day until midnight and both days at the weekends in keeping their businesses going, actually, if you could give them some time back, that might be more valuable to them than being able to, carry on working 18 hours a day and yet grow and do more in that time. So they might decide they want to, not work till midnight, but spend the evening with their family or something. And there's value in that for them as well, which I think we have to recognise. So I think it's, where do businesses go for support? Who do they look to for leadership? And understanding the motivations of different types of businesses. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. And I think that's to sort of lead on to the second question, which I'll certainly pose to Varun and Iain as well. I think you're absolutely right about how AI can affect the sort of key economic indicators. So it can increase economic growth. I think in relation to productivity as well, it will certainly lead to an improvement of the scale of operations, free up time, but also cost savings, which ultimately can be then reinvested into other areas of the company. So I think it definitely sort of feeds into the innovation angle as well. Varun, I'll pose the same question to you, and also the additional question of where can organizations go to get the help they need. I know that you've got a sort of strategy roadmapping public sector sort of angle at Credera, which you do maybe want to touch on, but I'll sort of yield the floor to you and yeah, keen to hear from you.
Absolutely. And I'll pick up what Richard talked about, which is that, experience matters and you want to listen to people who've been through that situation before. So, for Credera, we've got a very strong public sector practice, and we've deployed numerous AI and machine learning solutions in both the government as well as other parts of public sector. And I think the two things that kind of jump out when we're deploying these solutions, there's a bit of uncertainty around, how these solutions can be deployed, what's the next step. But there's also this challenge of being overwhelmed easily because there's so much to look at, and how do you, navigate that journey? So we make it quite simple. We actually start with a framework that allows you to look at your use cases in isolation of AI. What is the value that you want to deliver first? Because you don't want to have that question, and something that Iain said about tail wagging the dog. For me, it's like, chatbot is the answer, what's the question, right? That's the situation you want to avoid here. And a lot of it begins with, forget the fact that there's AI. What is the value that you see yourself delivering? And then we look at how AI can accelerate that journey. And yes, that means looking at the elements around technology and data and your delivery model, but it also means looking at talent. It also means looking at adoption. What impact did those AI solutions have to the dynamics of not only where you work, but also the impact towards society? And as you're doing this for specific use cases, you're building the guardrails that go along with it. You're building the privacy and bias controls. You're building the risk management. Because to try and do all of it at one stage can be really quite daunting. So what we try to do is to break those into steps that you can follow. And as you're doing it, you're incrementally releasing value into the business, watching how that value performs, and was it more or less than what you expected, and then doing it again, either with the same set of use cases because you didn't get it right, or a completely new set of use cases to unlock more types of value. So we've done this quite successfully in multiple parts of the public sector, and it's something that we keep talking to clients about.
Brilliant. Thanks, Varun. Iain, I'll go to you. Sort of keen to hear views on what's been discussed, but also some thought leadership in relation to what faculty's been involved with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try and keep it brief. We may get a question or two, and I don't know, but I think there's a lot in what Varun was saying there about identifying and approaching your use cases to unlock the value that Richard was talking about. There's a saying in technology and computer programming, which is shaving the yak. So if you want to achieve a goal, to achieve that goal, you've got to do a sub goal, and it goes all the way through to it culminates in having to shave this yak. You don't want to find a use case that requires that endless sequence of sub goals and things that you have to do in first. You want to find something that you can actually just get on with now. When it comes to embracing uncertainty, I think that firstly, everyone's facing the same level of uncertainty. So this environment at the moment actually provides the potential for a significant competitive advantage. So if you can get moving on that uncertainty, you can beat your competitors to this. I think the uncertainty can also be overstated and can be managed with an appropriate selection of a use case. So we see this in terms of decisions, decision optimization, decision acceleration, and faculty often refers to decision intelligence being approached through artificial intelligence. And I would say look at the decisions that take you time, that cause you effort and stress and are complex. Narrow in on those and look at how you may be able to optimize and accelerate those through the use of AI, and without having to shave a yak somewhere far off to be able to do so.
Thank you. It's a very good phrase. Not heard it before, so definitely one for me to note. Thank you. I think it definitely makes a lot of sense, and I think it is just a case of, again, I like what you said about embracing uncertainty, and I think it does often require that first step and dealing with what's in front of you, and then off the back of that, having some confidence to sort of navigate the other uncertainties that do exist, the other sort of challenges to adoption and so on. Fab, I think that sort of brings us to an end for the second part of the discussion. Happy to open up the webinar to questions. If anyone has any questions, please do flag them now. Don't rush at once. Okay, no worries.
Usman, I was just, whilst we're seeing if anybody does have anything to ask, I mean, I'm sorry if this starts to become too much of an advert for the Made Smarter review, but I think there's potentially a model there, and whether we could repeat it across sectors, I don't know, but the outcome of the review really was to produce a pilot scheme where businesses in the Northwest had somewhere to go in order to get advice on, and it wasn't just AI, get advice on the deployment of technology in their businesses. And actually, it's worked quite well. And now the Northwest pilot has been reproduced across other regions of England. And so it's actually, I think made some quite good progress. Now, whether the resource and the money would be available to repeat that across multiple sectors, I don't know, but it's an interesting model, I think, for how to provide support for businesses that are otherwise quite hard to get to.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it does sort of stem back to, I think, as you mentioned, the main smart review. I think a lot of the recommendations or findings are still current, and so it's probably a good reference point for us all to consider. Thank you. I believe we have a hand up from 𝗶𝘴𝘁𝗶.
Hi, Usman. Thanks. I have a question around this approach regarding picking a use case that can drive value, working it through, and then moving on to the next one, which is what it's an approach I've heard spoken by a lot of people in the tech sector. And I completely understand that, and it makes sense breaking up into achievable goals. On the other hand, I can see a risk that might not be the most cost-effective way of delivering an AI solution across a business where you've got multiple areas of the business that require efficiencies, and that another approach may be to take a more kind of overall strategy throughout the business, although then you get tied up in knots with what that strategy says, and inevitably if it's top down led, you don't always identify what the real needs are on the ground. So what does the panel think about kind of reconciling those two approaches?
Yeah, if I could just sort of jump in, I think it's a really good question. And I think there's two ways to think about it. One, why do you want to pick use cases and move fast? Because I think in majority of situations, it actually flushes out the underlying blockers that you may not see. So you don't want to get to the point where you're starting to design a highly sophisticated solution and then you suddenly find out, well, our data controls aren't good enough, or we don't have enough data, or we haven't really found out whether the customers or end customers want this. And the idea of experimenting quickly is to flush out where those challenges are. So I would consider that, right? Because you want to learn. The second bit is, I think, probably even more important, which is this space is evolving so quickly that it is not possible to create a robust AI solution at this stage. So the reason you want to do these experiments is so you're not sitting still. You're learning about what works, what doesn't work for your organization. And at the same time, you're watching the space evolve to a point where you can then start to place bigger bets. Now may not be the time for your organization to do that. And I think that's the sort of the balance that you have to strike.
I absolutely agree with that. I think if you take the second of the approaches that you could look at there, sort of the holistic strategy approach, you risk not moving at fast enough to be able to achieve the benefits before the technology has moved on again. You've got to go right back round. I think if you adopt a sort of a smaller use case by use case approach, you can learn, gain the skills, gain the governance structures, gain the senior accountability and responsibility that will then allow you to accelerate through other use cases and broaden out faster. So there may be a little bit more, if you've done it right, there should be less duplication. If you've mapped your use cases effectively and spotted the interconnectivities and the dependencies, those sorts of things, you should be able to minimize it. Yes, there may still be an unavoidable degree of duplication, but at least you're beginning to unlock the business benefits. Whereas if you're trying to pursue the perfect solution, you may never get there given the speed at which the technology is evolving.
Thank you.
I think we have one more question in the chat. What are your asks for an incoming government? An interesting one.
Do you want me to start? Do you want me to start with that, Usman? It's kind of my. It's probably what I'll be doing in a few weeks. So I think in this particular area, I mean, it's going to be a case of the government having a plan for delivering economic growth and a plan for delivering productivity and a clear understanding of how technology fits into that plan. So I think that's the first point. And then second, this is certainly a more collective effort, is so what are we going to do to deliver that plan? Because the government can't do it all itself. We as a tech sector can't do it all ourselves, and our customers can't do it all themselves either. So I think there's the plan is probably not too hard to put in place. It's what do we do to deliver it that I think will be what crucially the next government, whoever forms it, will be judged on. So we can have lots of wonderful plans. Unless the results are delivered, then there's not much point to them. So I think that would be my focus.
Thanks, Richard. Execution and delivery noted. Varun, Iain, any thoughts on that question?
I'll probably go back to what I said before, which is help young people with gaining the skills required, because if you look across segments of society where those jobs are most likely to be automated or move to an AI bot, where do you create those additional job opportunities from? And it all starts with education and being able to provide people the resources to be able to learn these skills and then use those skills. AI is an opportunity where the technology barriers have been lowered, and we should use that to an advantage where we're building those skill sets early, right out of school, and then taking that further into the job market. So for me, the ask would be absolutely around education and training.
Thank you. Education. Yeah, definitely. Iain?
We've had that one before, Usman, I think.
I know.
So I think I agree entirely. I think the thing with AI is that it's entirely cross-cutting. We started out this conversation asking why businesses should care. Well, everyone should care about AI. It is already changing lives, and it has already changed the way that we interact with society. So I think from a personal viewpoint, I've talked about trust and safety and things like that today, and that's the bread and butter that I think takes up most of my time personally, but is also a major blocker to uptake by businesses and the unlocking of the economic benefits and the societal benefits. I think I would want government to continue the good work that's been done through things like the setting up of the AI Safety Institute, the 𝗶𝘁𝗁 Summit, expand out the understanding of AI safety, work in a holistic way on this, and then bridge from that discussion into concrete standards and specific guidance that can actually allow people to measure and ensure the solutions that they're developing and that they're using within their companies are appropriate, safe, compliant. Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Thanks, Iain. I think trust and safety is definitely sort of multifaceted conversation, which does sort of feed into, I think, multiple areas, whether it's how organizations can deploy AI within the workplace, but also as we've sort of discussed earlier on, the sort of public debate as well. So thank you for that. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I do want to thank all panelists for an insightful conversation. I really enjoyed it. I know members have as well. As I sort of mentioned, more webinars will be here on the horizon. We'll have a recording as well, along with a few notes, and we certainly welcome feedback on today's webinar as well. And on behalf of techUK, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today, and a big thank you once again to Richard from IBM, Iain from faculty, and Varun from Credera. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.